I pretty much just like want to just BS like we always do and just kind of cover whatever ground we cover. But I would like to hear about your season and just in general, like the things that you're learning, because I always learn from that. So I just want to hear what you're thinking about that's maybe different than past years. And I guess aside from your hair, yeah, what's different, man? What have you been thinking about? What have you been learning?
Yeah, besides the hair, well, it's funny that the hair, I started growing it last like July was the last time that I'd cut it, but then I did get it trimmed this July. I cut it, and then it's always been a thing that I will grow my hair out until I kill a buck, and that's always just kind of, I've done that for ever. Sometimes it never gets very long at all. Sometimes it gets, quite a bit longer, and this year I was just like, you know what? It took me so long to get to this point. I'm just going to roll with it. There's some days I just want to shave it off, and there's other days that I don't mind it. So it's kind of funny. It's interesting.
I'm actually the same way, believe it or not. I mean, there's some days where it's just like, yeah, it starts getting in my fat face a little bit too much when I'm eating or like in my mouth, and that's when I'm like, all right, I could just shave this, but
yeah. Or the wind's like blowing in one direction, and it's just like going in front of your face, and it's like in front of your eye, and it's just like, you got to be kidding me. Like, what am I doing?
Yes.
But yeah, but honestly, this year I've hunted a lot this year, more than I maybe ever have for whitetails. Well, I guess I didn't start until the middle of October. I hunted mule deer. I was in Alaska in September hunting moose, and then I went to hunt mule deer in South Dakota and had a freaking blast getting to do that. And I came back and I was just like, holy cow, it's whitetail season. And honestly, I went into the year of just like, I'm just going hunting. It wasn't like hunting a particular buck or anything. And then, of course, the old trail camera trick, one decided that even though I knew that buck was there, he gave me the enough that like, I really want to hunt this deer, and I thought I could kill him in that like third week in October. And I could not figure out where this deer was bedding at, to be honest. Like, I mean, I tried, and it was just I hunted some really flat big wood stuff this year, and I've hunted it in the past, but I put like most of my season into this area, and honestly, looking back on it, I don't know why, because I hate hunting flat big wood stuff. It's so difficult for me to figure out some of the movements, because I was working on just edges so much and just different in vegetation types versus when you have terrain that can also impact movement. And in my opinion, hunting areas with terrain is easier for me to figure out, especially when you get into that pre-rut time frame. But I was hunting this deer, and I just kept, I mean, I felt like it was just, I was doing this, I wasn't doing the same thing over again, but it felt like it, like I was in the same area. I'd be in different trees, or I was on the ground, or I was in like, but I was hunting a lot. And honestly, it was the best year that I've ever had as far as buck sightings. I saw so many deer this year, which is great in a lower deer density area, but I do think the population is coming back a little bit, so I think that had to play. A lot of young bucks, a lot of moving, but I didn't in hunting really every day from like October 25th to November the 12th in PA. I never saw the seeking phase of the rut. I either saw full on chasing, or they were locked down. Like I jumped a buck that was locked down with a doe, but like everything was, it was weird. Like my normal travel areas I'd try to hunt, I wouldn't see any deer when I hunted there, but when I'd go to specific doe groups that I knew from previous years when they kind of came into heat, and I played off of that, then it was like I was having just madness in those places. So it was, a typical rut from a hot and cold, going back and forth, so to speak. But that was something that this year was, like I said, I saw a lot of deer, a lot of bucks. I had passed on a pretty good buck early. I ended up seeing that big one on Halloween in the beach brush, and And the thing that I've learned in the past, but it was just like even more in my face this year, was how much those older deer, even during the rut, don't like to come out of cover. And even when you're hunting the edges of it, if you can't shoot into it, you're kind of out of the game. And the beech brush will get so thick in those spots that I can't even find a shooting lane into that stuff. And I felt like I was just like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
It was kind of one of those situations. So that was, and then I did on November 7th, I did hit a buck in a shoulder. And I still don't understand. I was actually talking to Lee Ellis about this because, so I haven't used expandable broadheads really ever. I mean, I have killed a few deer with them, but never as my primary arrow. And it got into my head where I was like, someone was telling me like, oh man, you got to try these heads out. They're great, you know, and I believe they are good heads, but my mindset has always been to aim for that V, you know, that vital V area, right, and hold tight to the shoulder. So I did, and honestly, it looked like the arrow like bounced off of him. Like it hit and dropped straight down to where the nock was hanging down at his feet. And he, you know, ran about 40 yards and just walked away. And I came back in the morning and followed blood for 500 yards. He never slowed down, never bedded down, nothing. And grid searched and then still hunted the area, trying to never to be seen. And so that was heartbreaking. Obviously, you never want to have that happen. And but you know, it's funny, when I been shooting fixed blades my whole life, when I make a bad shot, it's always back. So I was like, oh, expandables, this will make sense. You know, open them up. Well, of course, that's, you know, the opposite happened when I had that on. So it was. But yeah, that scenario was really cool where there was this doe bedding area that I found in, actually it was 2016. I was hunting. It was this big, wide creek bottom. It was in this flat area, but it had a little bit of slope that went down this bottom, big bottom, beaver pond there. And there was a bunch of blowdowns just up on the bank. And I had always bumped does out of there, and when I'd scout it in the spring, it was always a bunch of beds. And I was like, I just basically went in blind and was like, I know this held does in the past. So I came down across in the morning and crossed the beaver pond and hopped up on the bank and just climbed up in the tree. Wind was blowing down out of it, and I heard a bunch of grunting going on the other side of the blowdowns, and I got out my grunt tube and just gave it to him pretty good, and he came in like, you know, just ready to roll. But so that was a super cool encounter. But the other thing I learned this year was, so I've always been big on calling. You and I have done a podcast on mine before where we talked almost, you know, a lot about calling, and my calling just didn't seem to work this year. I don't know what it was. I did a lot of calling and not a lot of responses. So I don't really know what to chalk that up to at this point, but it was a similar situation with my dad and also my cousin that we were talking about it. It was just an interesting kind of, I guess, analysis of how that went this year.
Yeah, I'm struggling to bring myself to call in a lot of situations, which is weird. I feel like and granted, I've been hunting a lot more open country this season, which won't always be the case, just the way that I also am trying to stay a little close to home this year because I got a bum knee that's still kind of recovering, so I kind of take a little more breaks this year. But I keep finding myself, like today, for example, we were sneaking through this creek bottom, and I keep just coming up with all these reasons why doing something more aggressive, like rattling, for example, like why, you know, this setup won't work, where I can't just bring myself to do it, where I feel like in the past when, you know, things have been going really well, it's like you say, okay, if he comes that way, I'm going to just lose that game. And then you do it, and then you move on. And I feel like I keep getting real hung up on it, which is just, I don't know, a weird problem. I feel like I want to, it's like in my head, I'm like, no, I'm going to go like, you know, crashing through this place, making a bunch of calling setups, and then I get there and I'm like, well, what if? And I feel like I'm overthinking it, which is just a weird thing that I'm going through currently.
That's not typical for you. And I wonder if it had to do with that knee surgery, that something the doctors put into you that's, making you overthink things a little bit.
I mean, I think one thing that is a little interesting is I know that it has in general held up my aggressive attitude towards things. There's something that's missing this year that, like when I'm making a stalk or moving in on something, it's still not quite there. I mean, I know that it's not forever, but we're only like, I think it's 8 months since I had surgery. So it's like, it's definitely not 100%. Like, I don't know, I guess, if anyone's listening to this and they're about to have knee surgery, have had knee surgery or whatever, it's like, it's going to be a long time, like, and you can hang at like 75% for a long time. And I think, when they say it's going to be a year, or, I've even had people say like, a couple years before they really feel like themselves again. It's feeling more and more true. Now, again, not to say that I can't get around and do stuff for the most part fine, but it definitely is a different game when you can't just like jump down on all fours and crawl real easily like I have been able to do in the past. That changes things a lot. But anyway,
someone like you that's so active too, like it's got to be hard. I mean, I'm sure at the beginning too, because I remember when you told me it happened, or maybe I saw you right after it happened.
Might have it.
WTF?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, and I was like, man, that's gonna be a tough one, especially for you being someone who is so active and like with your hunting style of everything and just like very active and moving and up and down and over and crawling and doing all these things. Like that's not an easy task by any means.
No, but like every day that goes by, you're just a little closer to getting back to what it was, and I do feel fully confident that it will. It's just, or very close, whatever. But it's still just, she's still tender down there, but we'll get back.
Yeah.
But one thing that you said that I find interesting and feel like isn't something that's talked about a ton is hunting doe bedding areas specifically. Maybe we've talked about this before, but it doesn't seem like it. Like hunting does during the rut is something that at some point in the season, I always have to slow myself down and say, hey, don't overthink this. Just go to where the deer are. And a lot of times I think I or our group will refer to hunting just like heavy concentrations of sign. But like what we're kind of talking about at the end of the day is just where there's a lot of does. And then if you're watching like something on TV where it's a property that's managed and has like, food plots and stuff, a lot of times you'll see evening hunts take place even in the middle of November or, in the peak of the cruising and stuff. You'll see guys hunting over these food sources in the evening. And I think a lot of that is just because, hey, that's a concentration where that buck knows he can go to find does. But just talk a little bit about like your approach to that and how much weight you put on it when scouting, because you did mention finding that area when scouting, and I can guarantee you that I don't pay enough attention to specific doe bedding areas as I should in some situations.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because we put so much emphasis on buck sign and finding bucks and doing all this stuff, and like and me included on that. Like I am always looking for, all right, where's the buck bedded at? What's he doing? What's his sign? Where's his home range and finding this stuff. But when it comes to the rut, and which is when I spend most of my time in the woods, if like a lot of times I'm other places or I'm out west early season, like I don't spend a whole lot of time hunting that early, so I don't get why I've always focused so much on trying to figure out bucks at that point. And where like when you are hunting the rut, or if guys are taking trips out of state during the rut, it's like finding where the does are is super important. And does in my opinion, are hard to really e-scout and be like, I bet does are going to be bedded here. Because a lot of times does are kind of bedded at random, but they have the group that keeps them secure. So it takes just walking through the areas to be able to find, where they're at exactly. And I was talking to Johnny Stewart about it, and he said that in the rut he was struggling there for a while, which he ended up killing a great deer. But he was like, man, I've spent all this time just focusing on these bucks, and I don't even know where the does are. He's like, I can't think of where I've seen does or what's going on. And now, like, anytime I'm going through and I find a concentration of does, whether I bump them or I find a bunch of beds, a good feeding sign, I'm marking that stuff and having that in my head. So now when I'm looking at my map, I've got, all right, doe group here. And whether it's, setting up in these, quote unquote funnels in between or how they're traveling through, that's one thing. But the specific doe groups for me, when I go to hunt them, it's kind of a high risk, or not really high risk. It's just, there's a chance you don't see anything, or, cause if there's not a doe in estrus at that time in that group or anything, it might be pretty dead for a little while, but it's kind of a chance that I'm willing to take. And this year, putting some emphasis on that, it felt like it, once I was able to recognize that really in the middle of hunting through the rut and shifting to that, I started getting back into those encounters again and having that. And so, and like the places that I'll find does a lot of times, especially during the rut, is like they're being harassed, so they tend to go to that thicker cover and just bury themselves in it. And so it can be kind of difficult to find a setup to hunt. And what I was doing was, even though I'd scouted these areas ahead of time, the winds are always changing and everything, so I wasn't going in the dark and climbing a tree. I'd get in there right around daylight and kind of feel it out and figure out what tree I was going to get in, if I was going to hunt, from a tree, or if I was going to hunt from a ground. And also I've learned that when you're hunting those specific doe bedding areas, rarely do I have encounters at first light. It's because, those does sometimes are not coming back to bed until 9:30 in the morning. So, and the bucks kind of know that. I think a lot of times they lay down first thing in the morning after running all night, and then they get up that mid-morning and started searching. So I want to say it was 18 bucks that I saw over a 16-day period, and all of them but 2 were between 10 and 2. And we always, you hear that, but like, that's what I saw. It was just like middle of the day, a lot around noon, just like checking those doe groups. And it was really interesting. And one thing what really gave me a visual is when, not to jump ahead to West Virginia, but just something when you're hunting open country, which, you hunt a bunch out west of this open country, you can actually see the movements and how they're going. And watching bucks go from doe group to doe group, as I was sitting there glassing, and I was like, all right, there's 2 or 3 does in this bottom. There's 2 on this side hill. There's 2 on this side hill. And I watched a buck in a matter of 20 minutes hit all 3 of those doe groups and just on a mission. Like, I was trying to plan a stalk, and by the time I tried to plan it, he was gone.
Yeah,
like,
cruising bucks. Honestly, like if you're hunting, if you're hunting in the woods, they're fun. If you're hunting open country, forget about the cruising buck. I mentioned the one that we saw today.
Yeah,
worthless. Burnt 2 hours watching that thing walk in circles, and it's like, yeah, maybe you can cut him off, but with like, so much vast ground to cover, he could just, you got to, not like when stalking, like keeping my eyes on something. It's like, as soon as you go in there and he takes a different trail and goes past you, and then you're sitting there the rest of the day waiting for this buck that's already gone. It's just,
he's coming.
Yeah.
He went through before he even got there, and that's so true. But the specific doe groups, and even though a couple years ago, when I really started like marking that stuff and figuring out, because it was just like something I'd come across every year, is like, where are the does at? And it was something I hadn't focused on. But the trail camera stuff, and I'm very analytical on looking at historical data, especially in areas. areas that don't have oak trees, I believe historical data during the rut is really good, because if it's all browse, there's not these food sources that are changing so much that they're doing similar things year after year. So it was like I'd get, I'd look at my trail camera pictures and I would save the doe pictures versus, worrying just only saving buck pictures and deleting them. And I'd look at, okay, I had does in this area during these weeks and, or during this time frame. Or all of a sudden, one huge indicator is if I ever see a doe on camera that lays down next to a scrape, that next day is going to be wild. Like it seems like when they're ready, they just like lay down by the scrapes and are like,
I know you're coming through.
Yeah. And so that's something that's also interesting that I've noticed. With
that is really interesting because that's pretty cool. One thing that you said though about the open country, and like one of the things that is a goal of mine always is to try to hunt as many different habitat types and terrain types as possible, because like I hear people say, come over here and hunt. It's not that way here. It's like, yeah, I get that. But the more of these types of places that you hunt, the more experience you get in all of them, it helps you. Hunting open country, flat out, buddy, helps you hunt timber. I fully believe that. Now, on the other hand, hunting timber totally helps you hunt open country. It's just to have those different experiences, I think, is really helpful. So it's cool to hear, you say something similar, because it's just something I've felt for a long time.
My cousin Mason, he's been super, super successful year in, year out.
Yeah, he's shot some huge bucks, dude. It's awesome.
Yeah. and what he said, because I was talking to him and I was like, it really seemed like, especially, I mean, he's always been a very good hunter, but in the last 6 or 7 years, he's just been like automatic. And I was like, what do you think it is? And he goes, when I started hunting mule deer out west and seeing how bucks shift beds and how they're moving and how they're working through landscape, he's like, it's not exactly the same. It's not an exact translation, but he's like, that has helped me take basically all this timber that we have that you can't see 40 yards in for the most part, and just like act like it's not there and be able to try to visualize how they're moving through terrain and landscape and how they shift beds and do things throughout the day. And it was just, and I was like, yeah, like, hunting when I was out in South Dakota and hunting mule deer out there and hunting whitetails in West Virginia and seeing that stuff, it 100% translates. It's not the exact same. When I say 100%, I don't mean it's an exact translation, but there's so many things that you can pull from that to learn. And what you said about just hunting different areas, I mean, I don't care if you're hunting, even if you're hunting different species, you can learn so much about, hunting elk and different things can help you just be more well-rounded and at least be able to recognize situations when you go into things. But it's funny what you say about, like, guys will say to you, oh yeah, come over here, and do this. Every single person thinks wherever they are is the hardest place, including myself. You get these things in your head of like, oh man, it's if these guys came here, let's see how they do. And
hunting is hard. Period.
Yeah, hunting is hard. Exactly right.
I guess maybe unless you're in a high fence area, but like that's not even
Yeah,
that's not for me.
Not yeah. But no, that's
I mean, another thing that you said about like watching, observing in open country bucks checking does. Another way you can learn a ton from that is tracking, and I think that's really cool. Like watching how deer are interacting through following tracks is just a never-ending learning game. You just constantly get to see different examples, and that's pretty sweet too.
Well, yeah, my brother, I was just talking to him before we jumped on this podcast. He just shot a buck, and he goes with his in-laws family. They have a camp middle of nowhere in PA, and every year it's like their tradition that from the first day, from first light, they start doing deer drives. And they've learned these areas so well that they know what these deer are going to do when they're escaping. And from hunting in the snow, especially doing these deer drives, watching how bucks, when they're pressured, what they do, and it seems like they always try to circle back around at some point to get back to where they were and where they feel safe at. And by looking at tracks and being able to see that, it's super cool. We just got some snow here, and I've been like looking at the different areas and what areas got more snow than others, versus a dusting. Some places got 3 or 4 inches. I was like, I want to go look for tracks and do it that way. But
no, that's one of my favorite ways, and I've not even done it even close to successfully. It's just really fun to, jump out of the truck and be like, well, I guess the reason I like it in a nutshell is it feels like nothing could ever go wrong. Okay, you bump one, who cares? Like, I don't care at all. Good, right? Like, now you know right where he's at. Now get going, It's like, I love that idea. And I feel like, while it's not that simple, it's like, when you're bow hunting and you're in the timber and you're still hunting around and all of a sudden one goes running and you're just like, shit. That's it. That's my day. But not always, but it feels like at the moment we're tracking, it's like, I'm always hoping to watch one like, bail out of there. It's like, oh, now we're on. But I do really enjoy that.
Yeah, because like when you're in the timber bow hunting, like you're still hunting through somewhere, it's like a lot of the day you're like, I don't even know if there's something in this area. So you have this mind game, and then it's like as soon as you let your guard down, it seems like that's when you jump one up.
Totally.
And it's like, well, there goes.
Totally. Yeah, it's pretty funny. I always call it like when you're hunting your best, if you're still hunting or sneaking, you're never taking a play off. Like, you're never making a misstep, and if you do, you pause and you reset and you like retune into your environment. But it's a hard thing to stay super focused on. I would never want anybody to sit here and think that I every single day, have no issues. I never, make a bad step. It's like, hell no, man. I like actually recently I feel like I'm struggling to get in tune. I think part of it is a little bit with like, you get a bum knee or I missed all turkey season. Like, there's certain things that I think help me hone that skill. And I just feel a little off this year, which makes a little sense. But, I struggle with that, Old peg leg, is that what you said? Yeah. It's like I wear this thing and it's like under my pants, and it's great because it makes me feel like I'm not going to, hurt it again, because I definitely get in some weird situations where I'm, like, bending it backwards or would if that thing wasn't on. But, like, I got just, like, this gigantic right leg right now, and it's a weird deal. But
yeah, I just picture you going through the woods and, like, that one leg just kind of dragging, pulling it along.
I'm, like, picking it up and moving it along with me.
Yeah.
So, what else, like, are some of your takeaways from hunting the flat stuff this year? Because I know you said you don't like doing that, but like certainly hunting that more this season, you learned some things, and I feel like too. Well, I guess one thing that I would be curious about is when you say flat, it's more like just a rolling type of situation, right?
This is pretty flat, like not much even rolling for miles, and then it would like drop off into bottoms, and then it might, there's sections that might be rolling, but you might find a mile and a half of literally no topography change. It's just flat and kind of some swampy areas in it. Not true swamps where you need waders or anything, but just, where you're going through, and having gaiters is a good idea because you might sink in up to your knees a little bit, but it's more just like mossy, kind of grassy stuff that's open areas that are mixed in. But it's just really vegetation transitions are so important in that times. And like what I found was like I just try to find those places that have the most differences going on, the most changes going on, and that's like the starting point. And then once you're there, you know, I'd be like kind of fine tuning on where I was going to sit or set up. Like there's one corner of this. There was a clear cut that was cut probably. Well, I know it was cut 5 years ago, but they just went through and herbicide sprayed it. So they herbicide sprayed all the underbrush. So it's almost like a new cut at that point because everything's dead. Mm-hmm. And so it's pretty open throughout that. And this one corner of it where it met like a 30-year-old clear cut. It met the other part of the 5-year-old clear cut that didn't herbicide spray. So you have like 8-foot tall beach brush in it. And then on the other edge was a swamp. So there was a lot of things meeting at that corner. And not, I mean, they didn't meet at a perfect, you know, cross, but within, you know, 100 yards or so, a lot of this stuff was going on. And there was a lot of concentration of deer at this scrape that was there. But, you know, just hunting that scrape wasn't the ticket. It was kind of out in the open a little bit. So it took some fine tuning. I started with kind of hunting out in that herbicide spray so I could see and just kind of understand how the movement was working. And it was like, okay, these younger bucks, they're coming out across here, they're hitting the scrape, they're doing this stuff. But the older bucks I was seeing was like they were tucking back into this stuff. So I was just like poking a little bit more, and I'd get here, but then the wind would be a little bit shifty, and I wouldn't see anything. And I'm like, is it because did I blow them out? What did I do? And I just kept moving around in these places, and that was a big learning thing for me. Like a lot of times when I'm in terrain type spot, I might have 1 or 2 trees that I can sit in these funnel type areas, and those are the trees you need to be in. Mm-hmm. But that type of stuff took a lot more fine tuning and just kind of moving around and playing with it. And the last night that I was there, I'd set up. There was a little logging road that came out into the herbicide spray all through the middle of the beach brush. And that was my best place I could get in to where I had a couple gaps in that beach brush, and then maybe thinking that they might cross that logging road and have a little bit of an opening. And it was actually, I'll start at the beginning of this day. So I'd been hunting, I don't know, it was 15 days straight at that point. I was honestly just wore out, and I just wanted a break, but I had one more day before going to West Virginia, and I'm like, get your head together. Well,
and you were like, I'm forcing it, dude.
I'm forcing it. I'm not having fun, but I'm forcing it.
I do that every year, every season at some point. It's just like you're like drained, and you're just like, I'm going no matter what. And it's like, yeah, sometimes I look back on those days and I'm like, probably should have just slept in.
Oh, well, that's the funny thing. So my body decided that it was going to subconsciously turn my alarm off and not wake up. So then I do wake up to my driveway alarm going off. So I have like an alarm in my driveway when vehicles come in. And I'm like, and I wake up and I see sunlight, and I'm like, oh man. So I open my shades out of the bed, and there's a nice 8-point buck chasing a doe around my yard. And so I'm like, okay, this is how this is gonna go. It's perfectly frosty morning. I mean, everything you'd want to be there. So I get home, I get up, I decide I'm gonna make eggs and bacon at this point because this is how it's going. So
that's a good move. I support that.
So I make those eggs and bacon, and then I go out, get my stuff, go out to my truck, and he's locked down with this doe right outside of my yard. Like I could see them there. I'm like, I'm not gonna shoot a deer right here in my yard. That's not the experience that I want. So I get in my truck and I go out in the woods, and I get there. I get up to the tree I want to be in, and I'm putting my bibs on at the tree. And this little 7-point comes cruising by me at like 15 yards. And I'm like, all right, yeah, we're getting into this. And I get up there and I see a little bit of spikes chasing around a doe and stuff, and some fun rut action. But right before dark, it's probably about 20 minutes of legal shooting light left, but it felt darker, and I hear something coming through this beach brush. I'm like, oh man, here he comes. And it's kind of off to my side. I'm looking over my shoulder and looking, and he's just going super slow. And that deer, I couldn't see him at this point, but it felt like he got right to the edge of that logging road, and he was just stopping and listening. before he'd walk out into that open spot. And it's only, 5 yards wide, that open, and he waited until it got basically dark, came out, and I could just see this dark body, and it came down towards me about 20 yards and then cut right back into the beach brush again. And I'm like, that's what a big buck does. Like that's the kind of movements that they do. But it was just like, it was cool to see, but it was also kind of like a kick in the nuts to end, my archery season in PA, to have that. But it was just, I definitely learned a lot as far as how they move through some of those different transitions and how they're using that stuff. And it's just like, I mean, to really simplify it, it's like if you're hunting mature bucks, it's like it's cover, security, and that's just what they're doing. And they even sometimes you might get them if they're chasing or something, squirt out in an open and stuff. But for the most part, even when their brain is a little bit off, they're still on enough to do that. And it was crazy too, because I was worried about this area because there was so many cameras that I had found, but I spent 14 out of 16 days there and I never saw another hunter. So that was good. And not to go down a whole nother tangent here, but just one thing that I've been thinking about a lot with, I see so many cell cameras now, and I do use some cell cameras and I'm not against them, but I was just like, man, this sucks. I'm seeing all this, but I really believe that people don't hunt if they're not getting pictures of deer.
At least a fair percentage of them.
Yeah, at least a fair percentage of them, and it's keeping people out of the woods a little bit. And areas like that are lower deer density, or really any public areas that deer aren't on these patterns where 3 days in a row they're going to come out in daylight and do whatever. It's like that might be an advantage of like it almost like it's perceived pressure more so than it is.
Yeah. Oh, I would say it definitely is that. The perceived pressure is a real thing, though. It definitely has driven me out of areas. I mean, coming up on, those like areas where there's just, cameras lying down a ridge. It's like, I mean, I guess this guy owns this one. This isn't, I can't come over here because he's just got shit laying around everywhere.
Yeah.
But I guess the one thing that I wanted to mention about what you said about the buck hanging out on the edge of the logging road and listening.
Yeah.
I mean, you say that's what a big buck does. I mean, that's what even not that big of a buck does, like the one I shot in Pennsylvania a couple of years ago. Yeah. He did the same thing. He made a move, and we heard him come down to the edge of that logging road, and I'm pretty sure he bedded down. He either bedded down or didn't actually move a muscle for a long time, like 20, 30 minutes maybe. And then we grunted, made a little bit of noise, and then he came right down right to us. And it's just interesting that, at some point in their life, they get that life experience that tells them, hey, I need to be a little bit smarter. Even that buck that I shot, while he wasn't the oldest buck in the woods, I don't even think he was the oldest buck in that area. Like, maybe he'd been missed. Something, maybe somebody had skipped one off his back or something. Something taught that buck to be smarter than just walking right out into that cut until he heard something else that confirmed, okay, I'm probably good. Well, that tricked him. But he was, I honestly don't think he would have came out there unless we grunted. I really don't.
Well, first of all, I always assume any buck I don't see is the biggest buck there.
Absolutely.
So that's just like a mind thing that I play with myself. But
I think that's a great attitude, though.
Can you imagine if you were able to see through a deer's eyes and like to see that experience that made them weary? Because it's probably comical. Like you're like looking through their eyes, you come up and it looks up and it sees you standing there as you're sneaking through in a ghillie suit, and it's just like thinking you're being stealthy, and he's like, oh my god, takes off, or like whatever it is. Like I don't know. I've thought about that before of like, I want to know some of the things that these deer have seen with the hunters out there, including myself.
Oh yeah. Dude, absolutely. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of things that I think about that bucks have seen, and it's like my friend Shane says something hilarious. It's like, and I started picking up on the fact that he says it a lot. Like it's a thing that, you know, he really hits home a lot. Is, you know, well, you know, we're at least gonna go scare one. You know, and it's like the word, for some reason, the word, like, you know, people with hunting or, you know, with deer, a lot of times they say spook, but scare is funny because it's so true. It's like, hell yeah, you're scared them. You ever watch their eyes go like you ever like, as a driver, or maybe you wish you would have been a driver, but you're just walking with your bow and you like come around like a dead log or something, and there's a deer laying there and he just goes, and you're just like, yeah, that thing's scared of me, you know. It's moments like that that make them, you know, probably rethink some of the decisions they've made in the past. But
their eyes literally like almost like bug out.
Oh yeah,
they look up. It's like a dog, like when you kind of catch a dog off guard, but like seeing a deer do it, there's something really funny about it, and especially like it's not so funny at the moment, but like you see like this, like, you know, especially like you jump like one of the biggest bucks you've ever seen, and like you just dream of this, and you see him and his eyes are big, and it's just like, oh man, he's not gonna mess that up.
Yeah. It's so funny, man. I remember the one time that it happened to me. I was you know, a driver, and at this point in my hunting career, I did not know how to be a driver. I'm just probably crashing through the woods and not really, you know, putting a lot of strategy behind it. And I walk around this log, and there's a younger buck. He wasn't a real old buck, but I remember how big his eyes got. I mean, he was like, you know, feet from me, and it was one of those ones that just like burned into my brain. But yeah, it's hilarious how that happened. But so I guess before we start going down too many tangents here, I do want to ask, like, what the transition was like from, you know, hunting the big woods to, you know, your stalk, and like what you learned from that, what you have learned in, you know, the last couple of years from all that, and just like some of your main takeaways, and I guess, you know, the story, anything you want to talk about with that. I'm all ears, man.
So so I started going down to West Virginia to hunt with Josh Ilderton with the Untamed. I guess it was 3 years ago. Josh, I absolutely love him, man. I know you've spent a lot of time with him, and are you going to hunt with him here next month?
That's the hope. I mean, the hope would be that if I can manage to, you know, fill some of the tags that I've got sitting in my pocket unfilled right now. Okay, I was hoping to be there like right now would be ideal, but kind of just, yeah, I don't know. What things at some point soon, yes.
Yes. Okay.
You know.
Well, so Josh, I remember when I met him, and he was just, you know, such a kind person, and just so, you know, he's like, why don't you come down here and hunt with me? And you know, you hear that kind of stuff all the time, and honestly, like, it's just schedules and stuff never really line up. And that's just the way it is. You know, you and I have talked about hunting together for a while, and it hasn't happened. It will at some point, but it's just things get busy. But I was like, I had shot a buck in 2021 in PA opening day, and then I killed one in New York, and I just felt like I was on a roll. I'm like, I want to keep hunting, you know, and I had vacation time left from work at that point, and I was like, and Josh like, why don't you come down here with me? So I went down, and he took me under his wing. Like, it was like having a coach there that, you know, spent his whole life hunting these reclaimed coal mines in this open country mixed with some timber and everything there, and I learned so much from him that first year, and I was really fortunate that year to have stalks. Although I didn't do so well on them, I had stalks, and I learned, you know, some valuable lessons on, you know, when you're hunting on the ground like that in those positions, on drawing and when you should draw and when you shouldn't, and reading the buck's temperament and how they're, you know, how they're moving and doing things. And during the rut, like you're saying, when they're cruising, can be kind of difficult. But Josh has done good at times when he finds them in these valley fills, which or valley fields is both you and I listened to that episode you did with him, and I did the same exact thing until I Googled it and realized I couldn't get it to come up, and then it came up valley fill. So that was really funny that you thought the same thing.
Dude,
But
we've been saying
these,
that for so long. We're like, what the hell is that? And then you learn. Then you learn.
Well, so basically, these benches. So like that at that point, there was a buck that was cruising on this bench, and we saw, and it's like he's coming around the spot, and we're like, all right, thermals are pulling up here. So it dropped down to one bench above him basically, and it was like 35 yards to the next one, and just waited. Well, that deer ended up squirting up one of those like rock ditches and getting up above us, and moved into position. It was pretty close, and I didn't draw at the right time, and because he was not in a good position, but I should have drew and just waited for him to get in the right position. Didn't work out. So telling you this is just to say that I've screwed up a bunch of times leading up to it. Last year, I was only down there for like 4 days, but I'd went on a couple of stalks and even on does, and I was just like, even screwing up there, and I'm like, okay, what I learned was I was moving too quickly, even though it felt like I was going slow. It was just like every movement you gotta act like, even if you don't know and you can't get eyes on this deer, you've got to assume that they're there, and just taking your time and when it came into this year, that morning, well, the night before, we were up until 2:00 in the morning recording a podcast and doing all this stuff, and got up at 4:30 to go out, and I'm just like, dragging. And I get this big coffee at the gas station and couldn't wait, had it in my mug, and and I was like, didn't eat anything for breakfast, but I got snacks, so I'm going to sit at the glassing point, and I'm going to, have some fun for a while I'm glassing, get hydrated, get fueled up, get some caffeine. Well, right off the bat, we see this mega 6-point, and Josh was just saying about it the night before. He's like, if you see that 6-point, you should try to kill him. He's old. He's as old as can be, and just like, he's got a 160-inch frame, but he's a 6-point.
Yeah.
He's the coolest buck.
Oh, yeah.
And so I go to try to make a stalk, and what's funny is, like, you think of going to make a stalk, and you think of, all right, you see the deer, and you just keep the wind in your face, and you go in and you make the stalk. Well, so many things are happening, especially when they're with a doe, to figure out how to move in from a visual standpoint and also keeping the wind in your advantage. And I'm trying to circle out and around, and then I got to a point where I felt like I couldn't get to the next piece of cover without him seeing me. It went back and forth, and eventually that buck pushed these does into this just briar thicket draw, and I tried circling around, and I bumped the does out. And again, because I didn't think that they were going to be right there, and I kind of just was, lollygagging a little bit. I had a camera guy behind me, and I started off slow, and then I'm like, there's no chance they're going to be right here. Well, that's where they were, and so I blew them out. And when I came back around, I spotted this other buck that ended up shooting on this hillside with a doe, and so I got her on the backside of the hill. In what looks like open country out there isn't always so open. Mm-hmm. It's just really covered in briars and these autumnal bushes and all of this stuff. So I'm trying to get through this with getting snagged. My clothes are getting snagged. I'm going up through here. And so when the morning started, it was 34 degrees. And by this point, this is probably, 2 hours in, it's already in the 50s, and it's getting warmer. And I'm kind of dressed for cold weather, okay? So it's starting to get hotter, but I'm like, all right. So I keep going through, get up, I take a layer off, I wrap it around my waistband, and I'm sneaking up, and I can hear grunting and stuff down below me, but I can't see it. And I range the bottom of the hill, and it's 48 yards. So there's not that much in between us. And I'm like, all right, I think they're right in here. And it's funny watching the footage back, because Josh had sent one of the interns, Jacob, with me, or to be up on the glassing point and film from up there. And so he's filming this, and you can see the buck and the doe, and you can see me kind of coming above them. And I sneak down in, and I'm like, this deer has got to be right here, because he was with this doe, and the vocalizations this buck made my whole day from that point. I mean, he was grunting and making like a clicking noise when I can't even mimic it, because it was really cool to be able to hear. And he's just circling
almost
this
like
doe.
elk glunking.
Yeah, exactly. And he's with this doe, and then another buck came in, and he takes off after him, and I thought they were gonna fight, and they just walk past each other like they're on the highway. They go up, he goes up, he turns around, kind of bumps this deer off, comes back, and is in there with it. And the footage is hilarious, because I knew it was there, but I couldn't go any further because the briars were so thick, and I was like, I need him to come up, but it's gonna be like a 5-yard shot. So I started grunting and getting aggressive and digging up the ground and hitting trees and doing this stuff. And in the footage, you can see the buck like looking up the hill like, what is going on up there? And he starts like, growling at me and doing all this stuff. Well, I ended up I was so close. I was 8 yards from the doe, and I didn't know it because it was so thick in that spot, and they bump out. And I'm like, dang it. So I sprint around to where they're going around and trying to cut them off. And I just didn't get there in time. And they go out into this wide open bottom. I mean, as wide open as you could think. And they lay down, and all of a sudden they disappear. And I'm like, did they slip out? 10 minutes goes by, 15 minutes. I'm like, did they slip out and I can't see them? I'm like, no, they've got to be there. It just must be taller grass than I'm thinking in that one section. So I was like, man, it's 60 degrees at this point, and I haven't had coffee, haven't had water. I'm super hungry. I should just go back to her, glass into my pack, get some food, and, call it, we'll try to relocate him and go after him. And then something clicked in my head of like, no, like that deer couldn't have went anywhere else. You can see the landscape. You need to make a try on it. And the wind was just off to the point where I had to go to stalk at him was going to be like very close, but it was pretty steady being flat there. It wasn't swirling or doing anything. So I got out, and there was this old coal road, and I got to that spot, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to crawl from here. And so I got down, and I'm crawling, I'm going across this black coal road, and I'm going so slow that I would only move when the wind would gust. So it might be every 30 seconds. It might be every 10 minutes. But I knew I needed to cover my sound, because up against those rocks and the grass, and when it was dead calm, it was loud. So I had to make those movements, and I kept going. And then finally I spotted a glimpse of antlers. He stood up and kind of went around that doe and bedded down. I'm like, okay, he's there, like confirmation. Game on. And I found a tree that I just had to shift over a little bit, and I could keep between us the whole time, but I just kept crawling. And he got up probably 3 or 4 times, and this is over a span of 3 hours that I'm crawling, and just pulling myself forward, putting my bow up, pulling myself forward, going through this grass, and I'm trying to range where they're at, but ranging in that grass is super difficult. I'd get one range 74 yards, the next one would be 48, and I'm like, what am I picking up on? And so finally I just started ranging that tree in front of me and estimating what the next one, how far he was from there. So I was like, when I can get 10 yards from that tree, I'm thinking they're only another 20 yards past that. Because at one point I got to about just under 50. I'm like, should I stay here? Am I going to risk this? And I'm like, no, I need to make sure that when I get a shot opportunity, I'm either going to blow him out, or I'm going to have, a perfect shot. And that was what went through my mind. And again, I was like having that confliction in my head of like, what do I do in this scenario? Because I'm not very skilled or experienced in stalking. So it was like trying to go through these things in my head. And finally, I get up to, I see a patch of like clay or soil that's in the middle of this grass. And if I can get to that, I'll be quiet, and I can move laterally without making any noise because it's soft and it's quiet versus this grass. So I got to that spot, and he gets up and breeds this doe and just like goes to town, gets his job done very quick. Just to say, it was very fast, and he moves off, and it was just like, I'm like, man, that was so cool, you know. And I'm sitting there, and I got my release kind of clipped on at this point, and he just comes around. What I found now, like afterwards, was basically a little thicket inside the open area of briars and taller grass, but you can't see it until you're pretty close. And he comes around that outside of it. There was like a ring trail around it, and you know they were bedded within it. And he came out it, and it looks like he's coming kind of right at me. And I drew when he went behind that tree that I was kind of behind, and then I walked on my knees to the right just a little bit, just like kind of moving over. And I remember I wanted to shoot and just kind of like, there's my opportunity, and I'm like, no, just, you know, settle down. He has no idea you're here. This was a mistake I'd made in the past. Like, don't rush it. So I let him come just a little bit more and stopped him, and I guessed him at 28, and so I held my 25 just high lungs there. I think he must have been right at 25. I hit him right there. He zipped off and ran into a brush pile and just died 50 yards later. So that's kind of how it went.
That's awesome, man. There's a lot of really great tips there. I think the first one is that comes to my mind, and I've been in this situation before, is like, oh, where'd he go? But then you trusted that he couldn't have made it out of there. I think that's great. I mean, I may need that tomorrow, you know. It's just one of those deals that we get in those situations often. It's like, okay, like, let's be realistic with ourselves. Could he have made it out of there? Like, probably not. So committing to it is a good thing, which is step one.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is just going like he's there, and you committed to that early. Like, you tuned into your surroundings. He said, I don't care how long it's going to take. I'm going there. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there, and just trust that he's there. Even if I burn up my whole day, or, you know, I don't get my food or whatever, which I've had that mess me up. Just the back of my mind, well, I'm going to be, oh man, I'm getting kind of hungry, and they start rushing it. Next thing you know, boom, you push too hard. The fact that you like committed to that is really good. I like once you saw him that you could put a tree between you and him. That's like really, really helpful stalking opportunity if you've got that.
Yeah.
And then go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and like, one thing that I did say to myself was like, treat this stalk like this is the last stalk you'll ever do. And this is something that's helped me in many forms, elk hunting, whitetail hunting, to get your mindset right, especially after you've been doing it for days on end, and you start, you know, having these what ifs in your head and all these things. Is just like, treat it as this is the last time you're going to have to do this. And it makes you make those decisions differently than if, I've got a week, or I've got 5 days left. Like, and because when you start treating it that way, you tend to take shortcuts, and that just doesn't work. And honestly, I just had it in my head. I'm like, if I do these things right and move extremely slowly, if they don't move, then I'm gonna get
toast.
There.
Yeah, you got them.
I'm gonna get there, and that's what. And it's so much easier said than done, especially when you're in that situation. But it worked out, and it ended up being 74 degrees when I shot him. So it went from 34 to 74. I was hot. My mouth was parched. My face was sunburnt. It was just like one of those things, and it made it so much sweeter. After it all worked out, and I couldn't wait to just chug some water and get some food in me after that.
I think that I really like what you just said about treating it like it's your last one, because the very best ones I've ever been on, I also call it like tuning in. Like, you give up everything else. You don't care about anything else. And truthfully, when I imagine these situations, it's all I want more than anything in the world is that I want to be able to stalk a bedded buck. I just told Cole, who I'm hunting with right now, I told him today, I said, I love turkey hunting. I love elk hunting. I love pronghorn hunting, whatever. I love all hunting. But when a buck beds down and it's you versus him, there's no better game in the world to me. I mean, that to me is the most fun thing that I can do. I may actually like, hunting an elk like the full season. Maybe I like that right now a little more. Like maybe when, the turkeys are really gobbling, that's more fun than the day in, day out deer hunting. But when it's you versus him, man, that's something special. And when you can really tune into that and you treat it like, I'm never going to get to do this again, or like I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm physically, mentally going to do whatever it takes to get there. Those are the ones that you execute on. I mean, rarely do you just get lucky. You know what I mean? You don't really get lucky in stalking.
In that scenario,
yeah,
no, we don't.
I mean, it's rare, I think.
That total stalk lasted 6 hours from beginning to end, and it was just like, looking back, like I wouldn't change it for the world. Like that to me is awesome that we were able to do that. And it's like, I blew them out once, and you might think that's the end of the world, but they really didn't. They didn't catch my wind. It was sound, and I don't maybe sight, but I think it was more sound is what that doe keyed in on than anything. And I personally believe of all the deer I've bumped or scared, all the deer that I've scared, the ones that don't smell me are least scared than the ones that do smell me.
Yeah.
And so they just go a little ways to where they feel kind of secure, and then they bed back down.
They forget about it.
They forget about it. And it was so, and then being out in that open there, like that just opened up, even looking back on it, of the things that I thought weren't possible to be able to do or stalk. And it's just like, no, really all of this is possible. It's just having that mindset of, this is your last chance that you have. Figure out how to make it happen and look at what your conditions are. And I truly believe, even like me moving only when that wind would blow,
that was another one I was going to bring
huge
up,
because like that, because the grass and everything, when it's so quiet and dead calm, all that makes noise. And when they're laying there, they're tuned in. Those ears are going back and forth, and there's a doe, which she's way smarter than that buck is, most likely. And so like that's who I was worried about. And I could see her ears, kind of peeling up above the grass there, and at some point even kind of like bedded towards my direction. And so I was like, but the other thing I will say I think helped me was that off wind where for the most part they were facing the other direction because they had the wind at their back. And I was just off enough, because when Jacob was up above afterwards, he's like, man, I was dropping milkweed from, up above you there, and it looked like wherever you were at, it was blowing, right towards them. And I was like, no, it was just off enough where I felt like I could, sneak in there and get it. And it all worked out. And honestly, like I said, I learned a lot of that from Josh. Was just like, he's a very patient person when it comes to it. And I learned a lot from watching him do it and having that coaching. So my experience was, I guess, jump started a little bit than someone that's completely learning it on their own, because I had a good coach.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's really cool too.
Yeah.
The wind thing is a really cool one. I think is just like waiting for the wind to move, things around you. And you talked about them being in tune and their ears moving. Like, something that I practice while I'm in the woods is just how much attention would I be paying if I was constantly worried about somebody coming up to kill me, right? Like, if I was a prey species and I was constantly worried about it, it's like, yeah, it kind of makes you wonder how the hell you ever get close to animals stalking like that. But the only way I feel that I've ever done it before is I tune into that world. I basically become their ears while I'm doing it. If I start to push a little too loud, and I can, tell like that probably got to him. It's like, now I need to slow down, be more patient. I need to move with the wind more, or pick a different route, or whatever it may be. And I think when you do that well, it feels just like being in tune. It feels like when you're like playing sports, and you just know where your teammates are. The play happens, and the game's going great, and you're just right there with them. You don't even have to think about it. It's everything you practiced before. When you're in that moment in the stalk, you kind of know you're there, and you kind of know when you're not too. Like you said on the one, you were feeling like, they're probably not here. And like I've recently messed up a bunch of stalks on mule deer, and I know there was several times that I was like, man, I just never really got fully there, like the full tune in, and I feel. Truthfully, I feel extremely frustrated at myself for not getting there. Like, because I know what the problem is, but I'm not playing it like it's my last one. Every time. There's some that I did and still failed, but there was other ones where I like look back. I'm like, what was I doing? Like, I lost confidence too early, and then just like let a silly mistake, lose the game.
Well, in South Dakota, so I screwed up 2 stalks out there on mule deer, and I learned, this is something I really learned from that one. Well, both of them I lost visual, but I knew the first one, they couldn't have come out of this group of trees. And so I was like, okay. And so I go down for the stalk, and I'm creeping in. And my dad was up on the glassing point, and I had him running a camera, which is comical to, as far as him running a camera, and the wind's blowing like 30 miles an hour, and this lightweight tripod, he's trying to hold that down and like zoom in and do it. But he did a good job. But what I saw was, I got in really, really tight, and I was in this group of trees, and I'm like, where is he? Like, did he blow out? Like, what is going on? And then I was like, oh, he should have blown out by this point. And I kind of let my guard down a little bit. And I even kind of like stood up and looked, and nothing. And I walked around and didn't see anything. And anyways, I come around and I walk all the way back up to the top of this big cliff where we were up there glassing. And my dad's like, that you were in this group of trees and that buck came out. And I can't help but think that maybe when I let my guard down and I stood up or whatever, that caught me. Mm-hmm. Now the wind did shift a little bit too, so maybe that was it. But nonetheless, you can see it in the video. This buck runs out and he's like looking back, and I'm in there, just in the middle of it. And then later, a couple days later, spotted 3 bucks that went up and they bedded in the timber, so I could see where one of them was at times, but then the sun was coming up over that side. So like, you look through your glass, and when the sun's shining in it, it kind of gives like a haze, and you can't really see very good. And so, but I was like, all right, I'm going to try it. It's the last day. I'm going to go in, and I did this big long stalk, drop down this valley, get in to where close. And I had a waypoint marked where I thought they were. And I get in there and I'm like, man, my confidence was low, real low. And all of a sudden I see this goofy buck that I really want to shoot. He had this like big spike on this side, just a goofy looking deer, full velvet, and in October. So
really,
it was
he's goofy.
He's goofy. Yeah. So he takes off, and I go like running at him because I thought I could get around this knob and get another shot at him or whatever, and didn't work out. And then I just kind of like I just walked back to see where they're bedded at. And then the other 2 bucks hadn't moved, and I blew them out. And I'm like, gosh, like if you would have just
committed,
just went through with the plan and committed, that it would, you could have had a chance. And that again was all that stuff was in my head when I was on that stalk in West Virginia and those learning lessons. And I'm thankful for that I had those, in South Dakota and stuff when I came back to here, because I think that really helped me, be able to make it happen. And, I don't know, but the confidence thing, and I think that goes into all forms, whether you're hunting the rut and you're sitting in a tree day after day, or you're on the ground, or whatever you're doing, finding whatever it takes, you're playing your own mental games with yourself of how to, rewire your brain to give yourself confidence is important, especially when you feel, based on your scouting and whatever else, that you feel like you're in the right spot. You got to find a way to trick your mind into keeping that confidence, even when you kind of think things are down.
Which is a real challenge. Like, I usually struggle the most when, so like I've been hunting a lot of open country this year, so it's front of my mind. I've noticed this year, something I've learned about myself is I'm addicted to being able to see. So when I do commit, so for example, where I'm hunting right now, it's real thick. So they'll pop into sight and then they'll pop out of sight. Pop into sight, pop out of sight. And then you watch them go into a pocket of cover and then they disappear for a long time. And if I can't see a big picture, like I get down in there and I'm at eye level and all of a sudden I can see like not even 30 yards well, maybe like 15 yards, maybe 5 yards in some spots. If I get down in there and all of a sudden I can't see, I start getting super antsy, even though I know, there's probably a damn good chance he's just going to walk down this trail or on this edge or come out of this thicket. It's like I really struggle to keep confidence. And I don't think I have a really great answer other than just you got to lie to yourself almost. Like, even though your gut's not even your gut, it's like it's what you want. What I want is to get back up on the glassing knob so I can see what's going on down in there. But like, what good is that at a certain point? What good does it do to just see one? Like what happened today? Why I felt frustrated when we first got to talking is like, I kind of just watched him again and I didn't do him any good. It's like I got to get a little more aggressive and then start, if I got to make moves from there, that's fine. But like, just get in there and be patient and trust it for a little bit. But then I get in the timber, it's the same deal, but like day in and day out, you're never seeing anything. You're just like, yeah, what the hell? I'm set up on this scrape again. Cool. Like, I don't care. You probably did that 3 days, probably coming through tonight, or he hit it, he hit it this morning and I didn't find it till midday. So why would I set up here it's just things like that. I constantly, and it ultimately, it always comes back to, for me, sitting. So like, if I can be active, I can be patient in the active patience, but I can't be patient in the just like, wait. Yeah. But everybody's different, because I know there's people that are really good at that. I think can tune into that part of hunting way easier than I can. But it takes like the perfect recipe for me to be like, okay, I'm going to set up and I'm going to enjoy it. Because I don't even enjoy it a lot of times. I do when I have confidence in it, but if I don't, why would I even be there? It's not fun.
Well, yeah, I think I'm like middle of the road when it comes to the patience side.
Seems like it.
I can sit all day during the rut, many days in a row, and be able to do that. But then I look at, there's guys like my uncle, for example, who every year gets a nice buck, but literally he takes 3 weeks off of work and he'll sit in a couple different trees, and he'll sit there because he knows they're good funnel routes, and he might not see deer for 3 or 4 days in a row, but his mindset is like, he's just happy to be out, be in the tree doing that. And he knows that if he does this thing over and over again, it's going to work, and it does. And that takes a different mindset than,
I respect the hell out of it.
Yeah, 100%.
I really do.
Like, and it's a very smart tactic. It just depends on what you want. But what was funny about what all led to this stalk in West Virginia was the night before when we were doing that podcast. So I had found this spot, a different place, where it was more of like your traditional timber, or the top was a little bit of like kind of reclaimed mines, so some bushes and stuff, but it was like a topo hub, big scrape, found it the year before. And I literally said, I literally said on the one video, when it was on the Untamed channel, or they were doing a scouting video with me, and I was like, if I sit here for 4 days during the rut, I think I can kill a good buck. What did I do that year? I didn't sit there, and 3 out of the 4 days, a nice buck had come through that spot. So that came into my mind this year. So I go there, and it's a ground setup spot. So I tuck into this bush, and I'm sitting there, brought a little chair with me, so I'm comfortable sitting.
Yeah.
And I sat there that day, and I was like, I was talking to Josh, and I'm like, man, I've been sitting for weeks straight in PA, and he's like, Bubby, you came down here to Spot-and-Stalk. He's like, that's what you wanted. That's the experience you want. I'm like, you're right. And I do believe, and actually, if I would have sat there during that time, I would have killed an 8-point that was bigger than the one that I shot. Not, I shouldn't say I would have killed. I would have had an opportunity.
Yeah.
But that's not the experience I was looking for there, and I wanted something different. I wanted eyes. I've come to love what you just said about seeing things, and it started with out west, even elk hunting. Like, I started with hunting a lot of dark timber spots in Colorado and all these, and once I started going to more of a mix of open country and being able to see, personally, I love that way more.
Oh, yeah.
And I've become obsessed with it. So, like, that's fun to me. I love glassing deer and glassing bucks and, like, watching them. And even when I'm not making moves, of just watching them and looking, oh, man, it's like just watching this landscape, and you look at it for an hour and you see nothing, and then all of a sudden deer pop up where you were looking. And, like, that just, to me, that is just awesome.
I don't know.
Like, I get so fired up over it.
Yeah, and I don't know how to even explain why this is true. You put me in a tree stand watching, a small area and sit still, can't do it. I can sit and just glue myself to a spotting scope or binos or go back and forth for just forever. I could easily do that all day, every day, would have a blast. I love it. I've always loved that. Like, I remember being a kid and I'd sit in my grandparents' house, and there was this little window like in a weird part of the house where I'd be able to sit and I could glass this field way up on the property behind the house. And I remember just sitting there for hours every day. I'd sit there and just glass deer coming out into this field. And when you start, there's nothing in the field. But then by the end of the day, there's, back then too, that area was like super populated with deer, like too many. And I remember, you'd start with 1 and then 2. And then next thing you know, there'd be, 20 does and 5 bucks out there. And you'd be like, whoa, this is pretty sweet. And, I mean, it's the same exact feeling I get here, in 2023 when I'm just sitting behind a spotter or, just pulling up binos. It's addicting. I love it. But I can't sit in a tree and look at, like, a minimal amount of space. It's just weird. I don't know. I honestly can't. I think about that all the time. Like, why do I love this but then hate this? It doesn't really even make sense to me. But for some reason, they're like totally different.
No, and I think, and you and I have talked about this before, but the figuring out what you like and doing more of it and figuring out how to be good at that, because there's a million ways that you can kill a buck, and it's just like, how do you find the ways that fit your style and what you like to do, but also make it effective and to be able to make it work? And I think, right now I'm gun hunting in PA, and I'm done. I'm basically done sitting in a tree. Like, I like sitting in a tree for a portion, and my fun thing about gun season is still hunting and creeping around and checking things out, going to new areas, and just like having fun with it from that perspective, and or getting together with guys and doing deer drives and whatever. Like, I just like, there's different stages of the season, or like there's certain tolerances I have. Like, I love sitting in a tree and looking at small areas for a period of time.
Yeah.
And then then I get to like a certain point in the season, it's like, I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And I want to do something different. And that's and again, if I was looking at deer hunting from just a success standpoint, I'd probably do things a little bit different, where based on the scouting that I do and the trail camera data and all this stuff, I know if I sit in some of these spots for 20 days,
right?
Not that's an exaggeration, but I sit there for a while, like, I'm probably going to get an opportunity. But sometimes that's not as fun for me. So I want to find other ways to still be effective, but do it in a little bit of a different way.
And arguably, though, too, maybe more efficient at times. Like, in my opinion, I've become significantly more efficient by finding the style that I like. Because, like, for example, I can feel confident, and this is no trail camera data or anything. This is just, you hit that spot in the woods, you're like, son, you sat there for 5 days straight, you're killing a buck. I feel like that I come across those places all the time. Mm-hmm. And I feel like at this point I can confidently say that you give it 5 days, yeah, I mean, you don't come across like, scrape after scrape after scrape with rubs and big trails cross. Like, you don't come across those places and bucks not come through there in 5 days, right? Like, that doesn't happen. Yeah. But I find them everywhere, every state hunt that I've ever been to. But the thing is like, if I go and sit those myself, especially if I'm with somebody and they're filming, like, there's a damn good chance I'm going to be sitting there talking to the person that I'm with and not paying any attention when the thing actually shows up. So it's like, I'm arguably more efficient doing my style, even though, it may not be the most sure way to do it. It's like, when I get the opportunity, I feel like I'm more likely to be effective because I'm having fun. I'm enjoying it. Like, I'm not going to enjoy, day in and day out, full day. I mean, I was just telling Cole this, like, the 2016 season, I didn't even do it that long, but packing stands in, hanging them, tearing them down, driving home, waking up, doing it again. Like, that is like my memory of that season, while I ended up shooting a nice buck at the end of that ordeal, is kind of like torture. Like, the only fun part is when one shows up for me, like, I mean, I shouldn't say the only fun part. Like, hanging out with the people that I was hunting with was fun, but, like, you get to that point in the day, at least for me, where I'm just like, this is just straight miserable. I don't enjoy this at all, because I don't know. I don't know. I think there's just something, everybody's minds work a little bit different, and I think ultimately your mind just starts running around like, what am I doing here? And I can't turn that off at a certain point, and I think it just gets I get burnt out on it quickly.
Well, and too, the thing about the efficiency that you'd said is something I think about. So, I'm lucky that I have flexibility to hunt more than most people do.
Yep.
But with that being said, like, I'm not getting paid to hunt. Like, you're getting paid to make content, to do other things. So when I'm out there for long periods of time, and I'm sitting there, like I was doing it the other day, I was like, I'm going through emails. I'm responding to emails. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm like, I'm not even paying attention. Something can show up. It's windy. I can't hear, so I'm not going to hear something coming. It's close quarters where I'm at. It's like, I'm going to look up, and there's going to be a deer staring right at me, bug-eyed, and be like, and I just screwed it up. And it's like, that point, is it even worth being there? Should I have just taken care of this stuff for a couple hours and then, did that? And that's kind of what I did this morning, actually. It was like, got up and I was like, I'm going to work, get my stuff done so it's not on my mind, and then go out for a couple hours at the end of the day. And but it's just, that's something I also think about when I'm sitting for long periods of time, is sometimes I get distracted, and this is just my personality. And I get distracted, and it's just like, okay, you start doing things that aren't making you in tune. But when I'm still hunting and I'm moving through, like,
you're super focused.
I am in tune. When I was out there for just 3 hours this evening, I felt like I was in it.
You're gonna get one. You're like, get one any second.
Like, yeah, just going through, I'm sneaking through the laurel, and I'm finding these rubs, and I'm finding this sign and some tracks, and I see a doe over here, and I'm just like, oh man, that'd be perfect spot if one of those does, maybe she came in late and there's a buck, hanging around there. And you just start thinking these things through your head, and you're always kind of in tune with it. And again, I love sitting, and I'm not bashing that, because I do love that, and I'm not going to stop. But there's periods I've learned for me when I need to learn that I need to shift things around and do stuff differently.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I just feel that I say this all the time, but just you got to find what works for you and just find what you're enjoying and not making it just this, like, I mean, the term grind gets thrown around a lot, and like, I think that inevitably hunting is going to be that, right? It's not going to be easy. You're not just gonna walk out there and one's gonna, kind of slightly quartering away for you. He ain't gonna give you that. But like, he's trying to survive. This isn't a game. No matter what the species is, they do not want to just give up on it and just let you in. It's not easy, but I think that it shouldn't become so much of a grind that you feel like you're wearing yourself out, burning yourself out. And if it's becoming that, yeah, like sleep in, make the eggs and bacon, make yourself some pancakes, whatever. Like just chill out and like take a deep breath. Say, hey, this will be okay. This little break, we call them resets, break, whatever. Like this is worth it, and it usually is worth it. One thing that I don't really love, I don't love getting up super early in the morning, so I just choose not to. Pretty much this whole season, I've got into the woods one time before daylight. No joke, one time, and I didn't see shit.
So, what was that one time that made you decide that you were gonna do that?
I just felt like, honestly, I don't know. I think it was like I was excited about the spot. I had seen a shooter in it the night before, and then the next morning the conditions were very different. I think they were just kind of like laying low. It was super windy, like beyond good amount of wind, and I think that played a factor. And tomorrow we're gonna do it again because I'm tired of waiting around. And like same deal, saw shooters, but the conditions will be about the same, and I figure they're gonna be doing the same stuff, or a buck's gonna be coming through there. So tomorrow is gonna be morning number 2, but like it's actually funny. I mean, I really just don't love it, and I also don't think it's super crucial. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do it, and there's a lot of seasons I do it a lot. But the situations I've been in this year, just like, there's no reason to worry about it. Like, just take my time, get in there, and I would rather get in a little late in the morning, hunt all day, and be focused the whole rest of the day, personally, than get in early and then by 10, 11 o'clock be dozing off, because I will do that too. If I get up too early, it's like, I mean, that one day I went in early. I tried to edit, and when I did, I didn't end up falling asleep, but I remember like sitting there editing middle of the day and being like, doing that thing where you're forcing yourself to keep your eyes open, but your like brain's shutting off while your eyes are open. It's like, I was doing that. So I don't like feeling like that. So I'd rather just get my sleep and feel good than force it. But to each their own, man.
Yeah, but I'll tell you that the other time that I did the whole bacon and eggs thing, I remember it was 2008, 18. Yeah, 18. It was gun season, and I just was like, I felt like I didn't know what to do, and it was one of those things the night before. I'm like, I don't know where to go, I don't know what to do, and I was like putting this I was stressing about it, and so I literally got up that morning and I said, I'm gonna make myself a big breakfast, bacon and eggs. Ate it there, and I'm like, I'm just gonna go creep. For some reason that gave me clarity of like logical thinking. I'm like, okay, it's a Saturday. There's probably gonna be people driving this hillside, driving this top. There was this little valley that, honestly, I stole the term from you guys. I called it the buck nest of like, there was this little shallow valley with a couple blowdowns in it that I had seen bucks early season that were bedded in there, and then they kind of disappeared. But I'm like, I wonder if pressure would push them back in there. So I just crept along there and glassed off this ridge down into that little bowl, and I saw it looked like a buck bumping a doe around. I got out my little bleak can and I dumped it over twice, and that buck came right up, and I shot him frontal at 60 yards with the rifle. And I was like, man, that just changed everything in a matter of seconds. And I had, it was fun to do that, and I got my mind reset and made me think clearly, because when you do, say you get up at 4 in the morning and you get in an hour before light, and you do that day after day after day after day, you start, your mental thought process is just dead. Like, I don't know how
There's a
else to
reason they
explain
say
it,
you
but
should get 8 hours of sleep.
yeah.
You know?
Yeah, 100%. And like, and and it's just like for you, and the same thing with me. It's like, okay, a lot of times when we go hunting, and this isn't a complaint, but it's like you go out and you hunt, and we got to come back and work on the computers and either edit or do something that's the actual work part of it. We have the flexibility to hunt during the day, but that doesn't mean that work just stops. So
Right.
you gotta get that done.
Yeah.
So you're doing that at night, and you're staying up late, and then if you got to get up early in the morning again and do it over and over, you start wearing your body out. And it seems like
yeah.
the older I get, the harder it is for me to run off of low sleep.
Oh yeah, I've honestly just given up on it, and the reason is I've noticed over the years in turkey season, this is where I've really learned it, because it gets gnarly in turkey season. Like,
Yeah.
we're talking like 4 hours of sleep every night or less maybe, and you go a whole turkey season. By the end of it, like, I mean, there's actually something wrong with you at a certain point, I believe. Like, I notice I get real irritable. I start getting, like, growling at everything and everything that's going on. Like, I can't even, maybe I'm, trying to plug something in. I can't get it, and all of a sudden it's like, bah! It's like, I'm not like this all the time. What's the one thing that's different? Well, I'm not sleeping enough. So I've recently got to the point where, like, pretty much, like, that's number one. It's like getting sleep, getting at least enough rested to where I'm not going to get myself to that point quickly, and man, I will, if I'm not careful, I'll go. But you take those little breaks, those resets, whatever, and it's just, I mean, it's extremely beneficial. It's probably one of the things that I feel, along with the reset and the getting your sleep, just not letting yourself get stressed out it can be, at least for me, it can be as simple as just deciding, hey, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to stress myself. What does this matter? This doesn't matter. This is something I like to do and go outside and everything. But, like, at the end of the day, does it matter if I get one or not? Quit stressing yourself out. This is stupid. Like, why would I hurt myself, like, mentally by sitting there stressing about it? If I start stressing this season specifically, I've just been like, I'm done doing that. I'm not going to worry about it anymore. I'm just going to chill out and go. And then everything is better. I feel better. I enjoy my life more when I'm not just constantly stressed out. It's just silly. It's hunting. This doesn't matter. I mean,
Well, yeah, and two, it's like, and it doesn't matter if you do what we do or if you're just amongst a group of buddies. Like, you can start to put pressure on yourself of what others are gonna think, as far as, oh, he hasn't killed a buck yet. Oh man, what a good hunter he is, And it was like, for me, that honestly had started way before anything with social media or anything. It was just amongst my own family, and then what I've come to learn is nobody really cares.
Dude,
everyone else is thinking about themselves.
Yeah.
Nobody cares, and it's just like that's. And once I, like, anytime I start feeling that way on that side, it's almost embarrassing to say it that way, but I just think, I'm like, nobody really cares. And I remember an older guy told me one time, he's like, just remember, when it comes to hunting, he was very accomplished, and he hadn't shot a buck in like 5 years, and he was saying, he's like, I have nothing to prove to anybody. He had got to a point where he was like, he was chasing a certain type of animal, a certain type of buck, and he's like, I'm okay with not shooting anything if I don't shoot this. He's like, I enjoy it. I like seeing these smaller bucks and everything. He's like, but I don't have to just, be posing with a picture every year to feel like, I know that I know who I am. I know who I am as a hunter, and that doesn't matter to anybody else except for me.
Yeah.
And
that's right. And I feel like everybody should hold on to that,
Exactly. And and again, it doesn't matter if it's just with your brother or your friends, or if you're social media, all that stuff. It doesn't matter. Nobody really cares that much about it. It's what you stir up in your own mind as a thing,
I always think about it like, go ahead. Say what you're going to say.
the last thing I was going to say about that was just, you know, for example, say if you were to go and not shoot a buck this entire season, and you were to ask me in February if someone would be like, "Do you know Zach didn't kill a buck?" I'd be like, "No." Like, and I wouldn't think of like, "Oh man, he's went downhill. He sucks now."
Man,
like,
what's wrong? What's up with him, dude?
Yeah, what's going on? It's just like hunting is hard, and it's just like it doesn't matter how much you hunt, how much you do it. Like, there's sometimes things just aren't gonna go your way, and you gotta be okay with that.
I think one thing that is, you know, because I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, this might be that season for me. I mean, obviously things can change fast, but like, I'm kind of like, whoa, season's getting away from me here, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been thinking about it, and it's like, to your point, you know, nobody remembers that. Nobody cares. I mean, people maybe will talk some smack, but it's like, whatever. That shouldn't affect you. What really matters is what you learn from it, and then what you come back with, and, you know, change for the future. And I think that's probably way more important than getting one or not getting one. You know, I always say a couple of things. First off, one of the things I started thinking about kind of dawned on me one day. Like, nobody gives a shit about your mounts when you're dead. Like, nobody's going to remember this. Nobody's going to remember. You do, and that's awesome, and that's special. But as soon as you're gone, all the skulls and the you know, shoulder mounts and the shed antlers, they're either getting given away to somebody that's never going to know the story of them, or they're just getting thrown away. I mean, let's be honest. Like, those things aren't hanging around for forever. Nobody remembers that stuff. That stuff's not that important. But, like, I guess the other thing that I was going to mention is, to me, a good hunter isn't somebody that's shot the biggest buck or the most bucks or the most biggest bucks or turkeys or, you know, whatever. The good hunter is just somebody that comes back hungry for more and learn from the last time. You can fail 100 times out of 100. Do I think you're a bad hunter? Only if you mope about it and you keep making the same mistakes and you don't ever try to change and you make excuses. Like, I mean, just think about it. We've referenced sports as well. It's like the really good players could accept defeat and then come back better the next time. The people that weren't that good of teammates or that good of, you know, players were the ones that just like moped and made excuses. It's like, that's not good, like, action after defeat. After defeat, you just have to be like, hey man, that sucked. And like, you can be mad at yourself. You can like have a, you know, some time where you're beating yourself up. Because I know I certainly do. But the ones that I messed up are the ones that I like to look back on more now than any, because I've learned so much from those. You know, I tell those stories like, just as much as the good, you know.
When I screw up, whether it's a miss or whatever it is, I'll throw a fit. Like, I'll throw a fit to myself. I'll get upset, you know, get angry, and I kind of let myself do that. And I always remember this. It's not one of Johnny's quotes, but he always says it to me. I remember he'll be like, "You can't cry over spilled milk," and just like, and just get up and keep going. And like, I remember when I screwed up on what would have been the biggest year of my life in 2020, and I didn't get a shot, and I should have. I remember getting down on my knees and just like putting my hands in my head and being like, "You worked all year for that opportunity, and you just screwed it up. You, like, look at yourself right in the mirror. You did that." And I remember getting down, and before, you know, it was only like 45 minutes had passed, and I had probably an hour and a half left of daylight. And I made myself go climb another tree just to – it didn't really matter even where that tree was, but just the act of doing that again. And that was, for me, what helped me kind of get that reset. And
back in the saddle, baby.
Yeah. If you know, and then the other thing that helps me deal with those things is like, okay, situations could have been different. And I couldn't have seen a deer that day, and I'd still be in the same position.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's again, it's these mental tricks, and everybody has different triggers on what helps them and being able to figure it out. But it's, you're gonna make mistakes, but these seasons, like right now for me in PA, and it sounds like you and
in a couple of
honestly,
places.
listen, but I hunted in Alaska. My dream hunt, moose hunting. I never saw a legal bull. I didn't. So I was like, okay. Came home, tag in my pocket. Went to South Dakota, didn't shoot anything. Tag in my pocket. PA, and I'm struggling. I had good luck in West Virginia, but it was like in PA this year and in 2020 I had carried my tag in a rifle season, and those 2 years I learned more than anything because you get to see all these different things. And I used to look at rifle season of like that was a failure if I had to have my gun in my hand at that point because I couldn't shoot anything with my bow. And now I look at it as like, okay, this is another new thing that I get to do and do different tactics and learn. And yeah, I don't know. I just
here's one last mental thing that I kind of did by accident, but this is one of those ones. If you listen to our podcast, like you know that I hate this one. When I was with Keith, 2020, I rattle. We're making all this ground noise. Buck comes up and my bow's behind me. He comes like to point blank. I mean, it's like if you would have got drawn and he came to that spot, it's like one of those no-brainer shots, right? He spooked because I don't have my bow and he's so close. Well, we took a morning off or maybe a whole day off to reset. We went for one last day before we were going to go back to Iowa because Ben, Keith's brother, had a tag. We're going to go one more day. We go, and actually, I've probably told you this story, but the reason we ended up down in this bottom is a lot of your influence talking about creek bottoms, and we ended up getting down into this creek bottom.
That was in Ohio, right?
Yep. And this is all in the same video. Just a couple days later. And, I mean, long story short, I won't bore you with the details, but this buck comes cruising in, and he gets on a trail that I didn't expect. I didn't actually even know was there, and I totally thought like I'm prepping for the shot, and I'm totally expecting him to come broadside right in front of us, perfect, inside of 20 yards, and he ends up getting to like 4 yards, and he looks at us and bails. And I remember one of the first things that I said to Keith is I turned to him and I said, well, they can get bigger. And ever since that, it's been like slowly creeping into my mind as being like a thing that I should keep in mind because they can always, Beau, they can always get bigger. And I do this at least, I blow a stalk or, I saw a buck cruise and he was just out of range. It's like, oh, as soon as you start moping about that, which I've done, you miss the next opportunity and that next one could be bigger. They can always get bigger. So, like, trying to keep that mentality, and which is also easy for a guy that, has no trail cameras. I got no expectation out there, but it's like they can always get bigger. I mean, I do think that that's something that helped me, like, for example, when I messed up some mule deer stalks. I never worried about the fact that, I messed up on a big one because I just never let that get in my head. And then we found other ones that were, at least close enough, I don't know. But it's a fun thing when you always think like you never know what's around the corner. Like there could always be something that just completely changes your season. So here's to hoping that happens for both of us tomorrow and everybody listening.
Yes. I hope it does. Well, and if it doesn't, the next day a bigger one comes.
But hey, they could always get bigger. Hey, I appreciate it. I know it's getting late for you. You better go to sleep because like we talked about, if you don't get your sleep, then you're going to be struggling tomorrow. So
yeah.
Thanks
I appreciate it, man. I'm glad that you asked me to come on here and chat. It's funny we hadn't caught up in a while, but it's just like old times when we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if anybody listening, watching has not checked out East Meets West podcast, do it. It's awesome. It's like I just think that the topics that you cover consistently are just quality stuff that like helps tons of people. So I mean, check it out. I'll put links and stuff around, and if you don't look at it, you're missing out. That's all I can say.
I appreciate it, Zach.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you on the next one.